Welcome to another figure week, hard surface week, organic week.
Hey everyone, my name is Ahmed Al-Douri. I'm a concept artist and former instructor at Art Center College of Design, Brainstorm, CCS, CGMA, and various other places. And I would like to introduce to you this digital painting course that I've created. But before we get into anything, I just want to thank you for the support you've all given me this whole time. And with the support of so many of you, I've been able to put together everything I know about painting into this digital painting course. You want to become a pro illustrator, concept artist, or even just a hobbyist, but you don't have a clear map to get there. And that's where I come in. I spent the last 6 months compiling everything I know from my 20 years of art practice, and I've turned it all into a map. Starting with foundations such as rendering shapes, color theory, painting basic subjects, understanding brushwork, brush economy, all that fun stuff, deconstructing the skull, drawing it from every angle, all the way to master studies, stylized painting, and you'll find yourself at the end of the course doing a concept art project based on everything that we learn in the first 14 lessons. So how does it work? Well, you sign up, you watch the lectures, do the assignments, post them to the community page if you want, and treat it as a self-study, except for those of you who have signed up for the weekly meeting, where I personally critique your work in a virtual classroom setting. I believe learning by repetition is super important. That's what I've sort of presented a lot in this course, and the assignments are tailored for that, as adapted from my time teaching at Art Center. And each of these lessons have step-by-step explanations in real time. If you've ever seen my videos, you know exactly how I teach. And this course is intended to be a substitute for a college level course, but you don't have to pay the $4,000 or $5,000 per class, racking up maybe $200K in debt. With my custom design course, you'd be paying a fraction of that. And of course, I also have payment plan options if you don't want to pay for the whole thing at once. Thank you for watching this, and I'll see you soon.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Digital Artcast. Thanks again for all of you for joining the conversation we're having today, and of course checking out the podcast. I'm hoping that you guys, wherever you are staying safe and creative as always. And thanks to everybody again who's been in the podcast rooms in the Discord and checking out the episodes, and of course suggesting guests. I've always taken those seriously, and always go to try and check out and bring in people I can to enlighten your day and make the podcast ever more enriched. Today we have another returning guest. Very rare that we do these on these podcasts where we have people on multiple times, but the guy's just so awesome. I couldn't say no to speaking to him again. Today, once again, we are speaking to Antonio Stappaerts. So hey Antonio, how's it going, buddy?
Hey Gordon, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me again. It's
it's an honor.
always fun talking
again.
to you, both offline and on these things. So
yeah. It's we've had that definitely thing where we've been in constant contact for the last, but must be 5 years now, something like that, because or close to it, because I think it was 2018 industry workshops we bumped into each other.
I think so. Yeah, you bumped into me when I was painting with gouache. you had this awesome poster with signatures from all the rock stars in the industry, or at least the people that were there.
Yeah. It's sitting right next to me. You can't see it because it's off camera, but it's sitting on my wall. It's covered in signatures. Yeah, that was because it was the 5-year anniversary of initial workshops, and they done a huge poster to commemorate. So I got a lot of guys to Even now, thinking back 5 years, a lot of guys whose careers have exploded, like Matthias Zemeka and guys like that who are on it, and Christian and other people. So yeah, it's weird in such a small space how things can change. And talking about that, of course, now we've got you back on again to talk about Art WOD, which is your baby, which is your experiment, this thing you've kind of tried to implement it in the world, and it's definitely been successful. I mean, if people don't know you so far, for the returning guests kind of thing, and people haven't checked out the first episode, can you just briefly talk about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Antonio. I'm a small guy from Belgium that got super interested in concept art. I think back in 2015 is when I heard about concept art, like kind of learned what it was, and almost like that struck me, that just struck a chord, like, holy shit, you can do this for a living. This is what I want to do. So that's what I kind of almost redirected my life towards. That was my purpose. And so worked towards getting that goal, eventually became a concept artist, and then saw some, things. I always saw holes in the art education in Belgium. And so I was like, if I can give back to the community, maybe I can start something that I'm passionate about, which is combining almost the philosophy of working out in what I do with CrossFit, and then combining that with art education. And that's how Art WOD was born. So that's where started Art WOD back in 2019, and reiterated it each year like a concept artist does, reiterate. And now we're at the third reiteration of the platform. I'm super excited to see where it goes.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of briefly started because I had an interest in you because famously you had kind of went from knowing not a lot about the discipline to basically working in the industry within a space of something like 18 months. And it's rare. I mean, people have done it before, but you definitely were one of the quickest, and people were then starting to really point at you and think, oh my God, like, wow, I mean, I remember talking to James Ryman about you, and he was very interested in your journey as well, and he was checking your stuff out, and loads of other professionals were the same. They were like, oh, check this guy out, like, he's really went quickly, and, working professionally, and he's got a job. And because, when I was obviously checking out the whole path of being a concept designer, people were definitely pointing to you and saying, look at Antonio, kind of follow where he's went. And then I think initially it was like the Zero to Hero stuff that you posted on your YouTube. That was like the beginnings of Art WOD and starting to really find your feet in it, like posting stuff and getting art education online. And then Art WOD launched. It's weird to think it's even 2019. It seems like so much
crazy, right?
Yeah. Just before the pandemic. So I mean, that's been a whole thing as well. And then 2.0 was last year, right?
Yes.
Yep. And then now 3.0 is about to launch. So I guess for the whole audience that's listening, people want to get involved, they kind of roughly have an idea what Art WOD is already, but what's going to be different about 3.0 for the online art education? Because you definitely have said that you feel like it's going to revolutionize online art education.
Yeah. And well, the reason that is because my vision, I always had a big vision for Art WOD, like even bigger than even what we're doing with Art WOD 3.0. I know I'm going to reiterate it at some point.
Yeah, of course.
But the platform will hopefully stay the same. I was always like, when I started the first rendition of Art WOD, it was just almost me making a bunch of videos, trying to instill some structure into people's training, because that's what I see missing from most people. It's like the structure, consistency isn't there. And so that's what we do with Art WOD, right? We create these weekly workouts for getting better at art. And those are combined with, tailored classrooms to help you get there. Yeah. And we built the new platform, the one that we're using now. But it still didn't have that user experience that I wanted. It still didn't almost give people, a lot of people that come onto the platform still are confused about what Art WOD is.
Right.
Which tells me it's not a good platform. It's not the people's fault, it's my fault. And so now we're trying to, we completely revamped it. We build it from scratch to like really give people the user experience that we want, to get you come onto the platform and you know exactly where you need to start, what you need to do, how you need to do it, and how you get rewarded for doing it.
Right.
And so that's what we're doing with Art WOD, which I'm super excited about. We're working together with a team of developers that are super talented. And to top that off, which I'm not going to reveal yet, but we are implementing other things where we want to bridge the gap between students and professionals. Right. So we're bridging that gap.
Yeah.
To have people access to the industry directly.
Right.
Which is something I'm really, really excited about. It's going to take another half year probably of development, but
more work.
That's something I'm very, very excited about.
I mean, that's kind of what I've done with the podcast, right? Is try to bring people like yourself on, or other people who are professionals, and put them in front of students and say, how do you get in the industry? What can you do to get a job? I mean, definitely up and coming. We have a guest that I just talked about, Alejandro, and he's a recruiter for the games industry. So we're going to have some recruiters on at one point as well to talk about the whole process of applying and getting online. But yeah, I mean, that's been my goal since 2015, 2016 is, bringing people on and bridging the gap between professionals and students. So, I mean, and then also it pays off. I mean, because I go to events, even when I was at Lightbox, people were coming up and saying, oh, dude, like, the podcast got me through college. Like, the whole reason I know how to do and what to do and where to apply is because I listen to your episodes. So, yeah, Art WOD's definitely happening in the same direction. I mean, I definitely know you've had so many people sending you messages of love and affection and just saying, like, dude, Art WOD's changed my life. And it was funny that day we were sitting in a chat and I had poached some people from another server, and then they were like, hey, I'm here, like I'm in the chat. I'm like, oh shit, yeah. Because everywhere I've went, we've for the last almost 2 years consistently, we've had your Art WOD trailer at the front of every episode every month.
Yeah, that's been awesome, man. Thanks.
Yeah, just because I definitely, everybody who's always like, I want to get into concept art, I'm like, great, here's Art WOD. Go look at it. It's the only thing you need to look at. It's the main thing for MD that wants to learn how to be a concept designer. And 3.0, I'm thinking Open will definitely just expand the already huge online school you have. Do you know roughly how many people are in either the server or online learning in Art WOD?
When it comes to the Discord server, it's a portion of what we have on students, but I think right now we have around 1,500 active students.
Wow, yeah,
which is
a lot.
Part of that is also because of the video that I made for Proco that went viral.
Of course, yeah.
But I think the reason it went viral is, of course, big shout out to Proco for giving me that platform. But it's because I hit a snare with people that they didn't see, but is actually fairly obvious on how you can go about training art and drawing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think nobody has really put it together in that way, like in that structure, and that hit a chord with people. And that's exactly what we do at Art WOD. We try to simplify things to such an understandable and digestible manner that you can keep doing it consistently. Because I think the only difference between a successful artist and people that I wouldn't say are not successful, but that are not reaching their goals the way they want to, is that the people that reach their goals have just simplified that process for themselves.
Right.
Like they have the ambition and they just go through it and they plow through it because they know where they need to go. And with Art WOD, we're just providing that same road for people that don't have that direction.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen it even in like Peter Han's dynamic Bible that he has.
Exactly.
As well. Very similar process. He just breaks those shapes down and it's simple rudimentary stuff. And if you guys haven't seen the video, Antonio's talking about the video, which was how to draw anything in 6 simple steps. And yeah, like the more you can simplify that process, I mean, it's a weird thing with people. I've had this conversation so many times where people are like, you can have great artists, but not every great artist is a great teacher, right? It's a very particular skill on how to break information down to a digestible amount that students can really take on what you're trying to show them.
Yeah.
And I think Art WOD definitely succeeds. I do know what you're talking about with the UI, and I do know where people have went into even myself into the dashboard, and you're right, okay, where do I go? Like, where's the first place to go? Where's the first thing? But then I think because you were probably trying to throw so much things online initially just to try and fill it with content, you were kind of, maybe it wasn't the first thing in your mind to think about, what's the word? A roadmap into where to start and finish. So, I mean,
that's the error we made. I'm the most critical person for myself there is.
Like every artist, yeah.
Yeah, but if you the thing is, like, you want to give people the information, and I always said, like, Art WOD is not a content website.
Right.
Because there's enough content websites. We have enough of those. It's a platform, an interactive platform to give you structure. And with the current platform, I mean, it's good once you understand it.
Yeah.
But it's not friendly enough, because I mean, a lot of our content is geared towards beginners and professionals. We're in that like weird niche market where we tailor to both.
Yeah.
Primarily because we have a lot of professionals on our platform because they understand the value of consistently training your fundamentals.
Right. Yeah, of course.
But we, of course, tailor to beginners because we want them to have a starting point in their career. And that's where the platform, the content, let's say, was there. And the roadmap was there, but it wasn't clear. And now we've taken the, let's say, Apple approach, where we just simplify, cross through, simplify, cross through, simplify, right?
Idiot proof.
Yeah. We simplify it as much as we can, but we keep the value, we keep the quality of the content in there.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a thing that, especially when people are getting into art, is the hardest thing, because, I mean, I know Ahmed, our mutual buddy, he's just launched Med's Map, and I think he's done a great job in the roadmap sense where, there's definitely a beginning, middle, and end. There's a way to navigate the whole thing. I mean, his is probably more specifically tailored to just painting and going through that whole journey, but like your whole approach to learning is so vast because there's so much subject matter, even between organic, and figure and, hard surface. There's so much to cover every week that, it would be a monumental task trying to get that right, off the bat. And I'm sure you're going to do that for 3.0. So when will 3.0 launch, or when are you going to have your kind of initial blast on at the website when everything's going to change?
Well, I'm seriously I'm not sure when you're releasing this podcast, but seriously,
you want to release it, buddy.
When it's launched, we should be live. We're at the point of this recording, which is August 1st. We're probably starting beta testing in like 8 days.
Okay.
And then we're hoping to launch the very first week of September.
Right. Okay.
But we've been hoping to launch for the last 2 months now.
Right.
And
okay. Yeah.
The primary reason is it's a huge undertaking to migrate everyone to a new platform.
Right.
So we want to do it as carefully and as good as we can, because of course people have built up progress in the current website, and we need to have that progress migrated to the other website. So it's definitely not an easy undertaking. But hopefully.
Yeah, by the time this is launched, I mean, I think there's a couple in front of you anyway, so I think by the time this is launched, it'll definitely be live. So, of course, I'll leave all the links below. You guys will probably see the trailer run before this anyway, but yeah, I'll definitely leave all Antonio's links, as I always do, below, and you guys can check out the new and improved Art WOD. So, again, on top of the whole concept design thing, because, that's been your whole stick for the longest time, you did a video recently where you talked about concept design in general, and I say concept design over and over again because the job has definitely changed since I came into it. I mean, when I left my job in 2012, it was only just becoming really like a gig or a thing that had a name, and people were starting to understand what it was. But then it definitely in the last 10 years has evolved into its own profession, and design, I think, like we said, is more the relevant name. Can you talk about that and why you made that video recently?
Yeah, sure. I think I almost felt an urge to create the video, primarily because the term concept art gets thrown around too liberally, I'd say. It's like concept art this, concept art that. And where we first had the discussion there's a difference between concept art and illustration. Well, if you think about it, there really isn't. They can be deemed the same term. It's more about the context in which you're doing stuff that currently is concept art. And that's why I made the video, and that's why at the end of it I say we're more context designers instead of concept artists, because we design things based on the context where we are at, in which project where we find ourselves, right? So I'm a concept designer in the blue sky context. I come onto projects with me in my studio when there's nothing on the table, right? When the client has no idea what to do. Almost like a very early product designer.
Right.
And so we establish things, right? And we set rules. And then we have other artists come on board in a different context that take those rules and make them visually develop them into what the shape language might be, what the coloring might be, what the tone of the project might be. And we help facilitate that. But there's other artists that do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of roll into pre-production, right? And this is where it's for a lot of people. So a lot of junior artists or aspiring concept artists think that pre-production is everything. It's like the blue sky, and you do all the ideation and all the little sketches. And usually when you come into pre-production, everything has been set. Like we know what the characters will look like. We know what the environments will look like. We know the tone of the game. We know the style of the game. We know what we want.
Mm-hmm.
We just need a lot of artists to produce within this context. And so that's why I made the video, because concept art is too broad of a term. It's too generalized.
Yeah. I mean, definitely when you come into projects, I mean, stuff you've done recently, even with your dragons, and the whole Century Ashes stuff you've done, like, it's maybe a thing where, like we know where it's set, we know the set in the medieval set, and we know it's going to be full of dragons, but then we need somebody to come in and basically make all the dragons, or make variations of the dragons, so we've got more and more content to push out constantly. And you're very right on the context thing. I mean, concept in a general is a loose term as well, because a concept itself is a loose term. But I think it's good to, just in general, I think for students especially, just to flatten out that term, that you're not going to be making maybe the promo art or the marketing art stuff. You're going to be down in the trenches making rough, concept, ideation sketches, things that are very loose, but then obviously convey the idea that you're trying to get to, up to maybe a polished render where you're putting in, texture and color and light and
and not only that, like, I didn't make the video to say like, hey, we should change this term. I mean, we can keep the term, sure, but I just made the video for people to understand, kind of know your path and where you want to go. Because like you said, the industry has changed so radically in 10 years. With a lot of things, right? Even, again, I'm a CrossFit boy. If you look at CrossFit 10 years ago, it was an amateur game.
Right.
It was to find the fittest amateur in the world. Right. 10 years later, that's a very short period of time in human history. Yeah. It's an elitist sport. You cannot do it without dedicating your life to it. Yeah. Seriously. So a lot of these things, especially in our generation, through technology and shared knowledge, kind of expand so rapidly, so exponentially fast. It's the same for concept art, right? Because, with the rise of ArtStation and people sharing their work, if people share their work, it means other people can learn from that work, right? And people sharing knowledge, like we do with Art WOD, Brainstorm does, Proca does, whoever it is, we're all sharing our knowledge, and that just creates an exponential expansion of this industry. And I feel like, again, with that, like we do with Art WOD, we want to give people some direction. Like, because concept art is too general. Yeah, I want to be a concept artist. Sure, but then what do you want to do? Oh yeah, I want to be a character concept artist. Okay, but then what do you want to do? Mm-hmm. Right? So it's easier for you if you have some sort of focus to go in. And again, like I always say, train like a generalist. So train everything. But focus your career as a specialist, of course, because you'll need to fit a certain niche. And it's just like, I wanted to give people that understanding of what the industry is and what it's moving towards. And it could be like very much, Gordon, that my video in 10 years is irrelevant.
Of course, yeah.
Because of how the industry moves, which I don't know, right? But at this time, I felt like the need to create that video.
Yeah, I mean, and definitely, I'm in agreement with you. I think it's one of these things that the term will change. And I mean, even the term, like you said, of concepting and the role itself, I mean, it's crazy to think that the games industry in general, not only just the film industry, but the games industry specifically, who has more content and concept artists than most places, has evolved so rapidly over the last 40 years, right? So if you go back to even the 90s, when I was young, and I was playing PlayStation games, when the art was done in the studio, it was usually the guy in the studio who could draw the best. Exactly. The illustrations, right? So fast forward 10 years, and people come in the 2000s and like, we really should dedicate like a person to this job, right? There really should be a job where, and it's even when you look at a lot the companies and the tech companies especially that are moving forward into like the new century, they say something like 85% of the jobs that will be filled have not even been created yet.
Yeah.
So it feels very similar to the games industry, even with the birth of AI and other things within the industry, that concept design in itself could evolve into other roles and could be other things that now come out of this. And it's crazy to think how young the industry is, and we're really at the forefront of it moving forward, and really at the cutting edge. I don't think I've ever been in an industry like that before. When I was an engineer, people had been engineers for hundreds of years, and you knew how engineers worked and what the role was and what you done and how you learn things, and there were schools for it, and there was all set up. But concept design is so young, and like you said, pre-2014 there wasn't an ArtStation. Proco wasn't even hitting his stride. You were not even at the point where you knew what concept art was. Yeah. So I mean, like, it's crazy to think how these things are just birthing right now, and it's this whole industry is exploding in front of your eyes. Yeah. It's like the birth of the universe. It's crazy, right? I mean, do you think about that from time to time?
I do, like, because even we in the industry, we always worry about, everyone worries about their job, right? Especially with an industry that's moving so fast and new talent. And a lot of people say there's an oversaturation of artists. I don't know if I agree with that necessarily, because if you look at it, there's enough, like, there's a scarcity of talent. When we look at it, and when I talk with developers, when I talk with publishers, they have a hard time finding talent, which sounds like a contradiction, right? Because if you look at ArtStation, you'd be like, wait, there's talent enough. But so it seems like there's definitely still a need for certain people, certain individuals, and that's where you get into the realm, like, of that specialization. Like, if you specialize enough, but here's the thing, if you know where to specialize in, if you're like, I'm going to specialize in concept art, then well, good luck. Join the rest of the ArtStation gang, right?
Yeah.
But if you know how to market yourself and you kind of steer your way into what niche you want to fill, right? That's the cool thing about today's industry. There's so much need for content that you will probably fill a gap.
Yes, 100%.
I think there's definitely a downside to today's industry, is that war for content. I just read a very interesting article on LinkedIn from someone that said, I hate getting pixel fucked by Marvel.
Oh, yeah. It's a very common thing.
Did you read that? So it's about... Yeah.
I just know enough people who have worked for Marvel in the film industry that they know it's a thing. It definitely happens. Yeah.
And so this is where what I was saying also about there's essentially no difference anymore between concept art and illustration, because it used to be the narrative used to be like, super finished art isn't concept art. Well, unfortunately today it is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of studios require sometimes very polished things before they even go into pre-production.
Right,
and to some degree, sometimes they're justified. Even I do this, a lot of illustrations. And the reason we do it is because we need to show the client the tone of the game. Yeah. And when you say the client, it's not your art director. He knows the tone of the game. He's directing it. But it's like the people funding it, the producers, the people in game design, they need to understand it, and they don't understand it from a sketch.
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing. And I think it's very apt in what you're saying, where if you look at, like, again, if you go back to just because it's stuff you've worked on so we can talk about it, but your Century, your concepts with the dragons and stuff like that you've done in the Knights, like, that's definitely, I would say, more like a finished illustration versus a concept design, right? Because concept, when I first got in the industry, concept was extremely loose. There wasn't even color. Sometimes it was just a sketch. It was just a silhouette, and you were just finding, shapes and design. Where now, like you said with that stuff, I mean, a lot of this is like, it's like box art. Like, it's like a lot of the stuff you're putting on, it's like stuff that could cover a magazine or could cover, a finished page. I mean, in a sense, it's good because, I mean, it does convey more information, and people could definitely look at that and think, oh, I know where you're going with that. I know what you're trying to convey. But then again, it's one of these things where it might start to be a thing where the bar is now even more raised. Like it just keeps going up and up and up, and it's like, oh, great, now I have to do a finished sketch. Now I have to know how to color it and light it and comp it.
And this is actually where the new tools like 3D, like Blender and all these things are very welcome tools, because they increase your process, right? They help you create. Yeah, but they help you increase to get to your final result faster, because I've done a talk in Denmark recently, and I forgot his name. I feel so bad for that. Anyway, it's the founder of New Edge School and one of the founders of Terraform Studios, I think. It's a French...
Phineas or Terraform, is that no Phineas?
It's a French name, very French name. I forget. Yeah. I apologize, but he was showing concept art, right? But it just looked like box cover art, like, seriously. But they're so fast at producing it because they have all these tools.
Yeah, of course.
So you can still label it concept art. I would, because what they're doing is they're informing their clients in the pre-production and the visual development phases of what the tone of the game would be. But you definitely need those tools in order to create those results. If you need to hand paint that, like your job isn't fun anymore with the deadlines that you get.
I mean, it's one of these things that I've definitely, because I've done more 3D than 2D to this point, I mean, I definitely understand the importance of it. I mean, if you look even like, I remember, oh God, this was maybe a year ago, I went on Tyler Edlund's podcast, and he was obviously intrigued at the time when I'd done that whole dungeon scene and how I came to that. And, you know, at a point, Tyler was actually, reaching out to me and saying if I'd want to do some 3D stuff for him. And I was like, sure. But then I think Tyler just took the initiative and he was like, I'm just going to learn it. I'm just going to learn 3D. I'm just going to put it in my another, tool on my belt and just something else that I can do. And now you look at Tyler's work and how far it's come, since even last year. And yeah, 3D is definitely, I mean, interesting as well, because I know in Art WOD, as you know, at the time of recording, there was a hard surface week where we had just recently where you were doing 3D blockouts, which were then turned into buildings. Have you maybe started to embrace 3D more? Because I know initially it was maybe something you weren't focusing on because fundamentals are so important to you with learning and student stuff. Is that something you're trying now more to integrate into the learning side of it?
It's a really good question. And I would say yes, almost out of necessity. Not out of necessity to learn the basics, but out of necessity to make artists understand that 3D is part of the pipeline now. Yeah. And so when we did the hard surface thing, like the focus was on design, right? And how you might walk through a design pipeline where you get like a very rough blockout for someone and you need to design on top of it. And then you can use 3D to your advantage. And that's kind of by providing our students with these pre-made blockouts, we're alleviating the threshold. Like they don't need to learn 3D themselves. They can use what is already available, but it might inspire them to start using 3D. Yeah. And another thing, like, because in the new program, we'll have learning paths, right? So we'll have learning paths for specific context designers, which will eventually branch out into specialties. And out of these specialties, I will definitely have people that show Blender skills, right? And how you can do it. For instance, I'm enamored with Paul Coulthard's. He's a YouTube channel called Spitfire Storyboards. Been in contact with him, and I want him to do a course for Art WOD that is specific to Blender animation and grease pencil. Okay, because it's what he does. He fills in a niche that almost no one else is doing, and it's so good. I mean, when it comes to animatics and making your visions come to life,
like 3D storyboards in a sense.
Yeah, 3D storyboards, but like doing animatics, like almost with grease pencil, drawing on top of your,
right.
Drawing on top of a simple plane, but then you can have control of your camera. You have control over how things move, how you divide up your keyframes. So that's awesome. So you don't have to hand paint it. You don't have to hand draw it all the time. So that's something I just see as a necessity in today's industry. If you want to get into animation, if you want to get into movie making, storyboards, animatics, stuff like that. Yeah. So that's something that can definitely be a part of Art WOD because it's like a fundamental skill that you're using.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It's one of these things where I think, 3D in itself, photo bashing, they've all been tools that have came along, and it's always just to expedite, just to make things faster, just to get to because like you said, when you're in a studio and you've got maybe 2 or 3 weeks to turn something around, you can't hand paint everything. Some paintings can take you a week, some paintings can take you a couple of days. So if you need like 50 of them, then it's like, sure, like give me the 3D, like what's the quickest route? Like where's the model of the dragon? Like let's just fire it up and paint over it. And I think it's good because, it's a fine line you've got to trace because I spoke to so many people in the industry. Emerson Tung is one that comes to my mind. He's at id Software, but Emerson is an incredible draftsman and has a really cool and understanding of the fundamentals of drawing and perspective. And he was like, the best people I've met in the industry are people who can draw and can draw well. Yeah, there's certain people obviously who get a niche where they can, use 3D to an extent where they don't even have to paint because 3D will just do it all for them. But he's like the most creative people and the best people in the industry I've seen are people who have fundamental, amazing drawing skills. Kim Jong-ji is one of them, obviously. People like TB Choi, people who are just like so enamored with their draftsmanship that they can just make anything from their head. And I'm sure you would agree with that, obviously, where you are.
Well, that's our philosophy. That's my philosophy, right? don't want to sound arrogant, but I fit in the same category as like good draftsman.
Yes.
I'm not like,
I would agree with that.
I don't even care about pretty pictures and super refined splash art painting. I love the act of drawing and putting ideation on paper. That's what I love. That's what people hire me to do. And apparently that's a very rare skill.
It is.
So, and that's why we don't want to dilute the Art WOD program when we introduce things like 3D.
Yeah.
It should be at the bottom of the list. It should be to specialize, right?
It's just a tool.
Exactly. But that's the thing, right? And you need to acquire those draftsman skills, because if you have that, like you said, you're a rare breed. And that's what we're trying to facilitate with Art WOD. But imagine then you also master 3D.
Yeah, unstoppable.
Then you're unstoppable. Exactly, because you can, if you have that spatial awareness, you know how to jot down things quickly, but you can also quickly jot down a scene in 3D, sketch on top of it, even animate it if you want to. I mean, you're unstoppable, and you're going to get hired everywhere.
Yeah, 100%. I was just having this conversation with a mutual friend, Rembert, who is a storyboard artist at Riot Games. And he was like, "Dude,
he's been over a couple of months ago.
You know, he's a great dude. I've just been talking to him more and more, and he's just been like, you know, at Riot especially, we can't find people. Like, I mean, people talk about the oversaturation of art, especially within concept, but sure, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people want to learn how to do it, but like the people who can do it, maybe a handful in a room, you know, like would only fill a room, you know, like he was like that, like, the reason he wanted to do storyboarding was because he just wanted to draw. Like, he just loved the creation of drawing so much that he just wanted that to be his full-time gig. And now he's like, trying to find other people to fit that niche it's difficult, you know, it's really hard, it's almost impossible. And like that's the common thing I hear with studios, is that there's a ton of jobs, but there's just not enough people to fill it. People who aren't good enough to fill it. And 100%, like, you know, the dedication to draftsmanship and that skill. I think when 3D and photo bashing came along, people saw like, oh, there's a road in. There's a quick access, you know, there's the exit door. I can go through there and just get in straight away. And for some people, definitely that did work and people kind of got that niche. But then when we come back around now to design and people are wanting more things to be designed, especially within stylized, I feel like we had this conversation also with a couple of people who were talking about Riot Games and Blizzard and saying that realism to an extent can go so far and you can fake that with 3D, but then stylization and stylized realism, I think, is taken so much more precedent now because people want to explore in worlds that are away from the norm and away from the real world. So people like yourself are now finding an abundance of work because, you know, these companies who make this kind of stuff are exploding, Riot being one of them, obviously. But like, it is a very rare skill to have, to be a good draftsman and someone who can really ideate on paper with pencil at that level and then build it up over, you know, Photoshop, Procreate, whatever they're going to use.
Yeah. This
and
is
again,
something I even learned back in industry workshops. I think it was 2017 then, when I was talking to a couple of recruiters, and they said back in 2014 we started making a huge mistake of only recruiting photo bash artists. And this is not to put down people that photo bash at all. No. But it's like what you said, a lot of beginning artists saw it as a way in, like a shortcut. And what they noticed when hiring a lot of people that had very fancy portfolios that were photo bashed beautifully, they weren't productive because they couldn't ideate fast enough for the pipeline for the requirements of the product. Right. So your production slows down, and if your production slows down, that costs money. Yeah. So you're not an effective artist, right? And this is where guys like Rembert, guys like, you know, a lot of my peers from Belgium, like Jens Klaassen, Jonas Minebo, and these are Bram Cells. These are people that know how to sketch, know how to ideate, and it makes them such effective artists. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, 100%. And then, I mean, I think that's also, I mean, moving on to the thing you talked about earlier with sketch studios and the thing you've now created, you probably did see that niche and saw that gap in the market where you had the talent, you had people alongside you that probably could fill that gap, and you were like, right, great, let's put a party together, let's put these guys in the same room and let's try and win work together as a studio. Where did that start from? Because that's still in its infancy in its sense, because that was that last year you launched Sketch Studios?
Actually, this year.
Okay.
Well, I officially launched it last year, but we almost only got into production this year.
Right, okay. Yeah. And was that just a thing, like you said, there was a gap, there was something you saw where you could slide in there with people and take some work, or how did that go out?
A bit of both, although I also did it out of necessity. So I still have the incredible fortune that I'm working on a couple of projects that have required me to expand.
Right.
So I've been almost blessed with some more responsibility when it comes to, instead of only being a lead artist, I am now, more of an associate art director on a lot of projects. And so
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. But I can now share my vision with people, and I wanted to create like a small studio. I'm not trying to get big, like Axis big or Terraform Studio big.
Yeah, of course,
I don't need that. I want to have like that core niche group of people that are so specialized, but they can fill that blue sky visual development gap, right? And that's where that came from. And fortunately, I had one student, Axel, who came onto the Art WOD program. Yeah, he came onto the Art WOD program, and he showed that ambition and that drive to become good. And what he accomplished within a year was amazing. And so that gave me the incentive to have him do a lot of some small gigs for Art WOD when it came to sketching examples, not teaching yet, but just giving some examples and demonstrations. And then give him some small projects for Sketch Studio, see how he would handle it. And as you would expect, he did great. And that gave me the confidence to have him on board permanently and just share my vision, because he can sketch the way I sketch, which is great. And then we have another artist, which is Karel de Havitter, which also someone that actually got me into art. Funnily enough, we met when I was still working in retail.
Cool.
But he's the guy that you would say is raw talent. There's some people that you say like it's hard work, and it is, like, he works incredibly hard. I think he's a lot on the Facebook group called Daily Spit Paint. I know, I'm sure you know what that is, right? So it's 30-minute spit paints where you have to do a painting or a keyframe or whatever within 30 minutes. He has 3,500 of those. So he's ridiculous. He's like one of the best cinematic artists I've ever seen when it comes to visual development and colorist. So I really wanted him to be on board, and he fills that other gap that me and Axel lack.
Right.
And then we have some freelancers that still do things from time to time, but that's temporary. But yeah, that's what I wanted to do with Sketch.
Yeah, but the core of you is 3 people right now.
3 people, yeah. And I'm not seeing it go past 5, honestly, because that's enough. Because that's on the niche that we focus, right? It's blue sky and visual development. And like I said in the YouTube video that I made, there's not a lot of artists that usually are on those stages. You just need a core of people, because it costs a lot of money. I mean, for the studio, because it takes, you don't know what you're asking, right? It's not, you cannot come up to us and say, hey, we need this many illustrations, we need this many, because you don't know what you're making. So it's like day by day you need to see, and that's for every project, every client, every publisher. There's like, okay, we need to build something new. We don't know what it is, we don't know how long it will take, when we will get the vision of the game. So we need to hire someone. Usually it's one artist. But at this stage, bigger projects is usually a couple of artists, and that's where we are trying to fill that gap.
No, I mean, it makes sense. And I mean, I know, so there was a guy I actually went to talk to in initial workshops, Jamie Clapham, I think his name is. But Jamie was, at the time, I think maybe even Creative Assembly or Sumo Digital, or one of the big studios in the South. But he then formed a studio called Brainbug. I don't know if you've heard of those guys, but Brainbug... Yeah, Brainbug are, like you, a studio that was formed out of a couple of concept artists wanting to get together to win and bid work and then do stuff on their own, and now have to take on, larger projects and bigger studios and stuff like that. So it's a very, I think even with Terraform it was the same, right? I'm sure it was Phineas at the time from America who worked at ILM that he formed that studio also with Pablo and a couple other guys. Yeah. And so it's a very common thing now. That people are kind of doing that. Even
but they just exploded.
No, of course, no. They went
when I heard the founder of Terraform talk about it, I think they do like 80 projects at a time, and I remember asking, like, did you say 18? No, 80. Like, what?
You're like, okay,
okay.
You keep
You're
on
a different level. You do you.
You do you, bud. Yeah, no, because I mean, Finney and Pablo, a lot of those guys were at ILM, so it was mostly just AAA film work and all those kind of big studio stuff for Marvel. And if you've got that kind of access to those studios, then great, you will find work. But then, I mean, like it's always these things that we've talked about within concept is like you've got to define your own success, right? You can't always compare yourself to those studios and other people and like, oh, this guy worked on Thor, this guy worked on this, Avengers film, and you're like, oh, that's great. I mean, like, but then if you're working on a project for a studio that you love, what is success to you? Is it that you're working on the big budget stuff, or is it that you're just working? Is that enough for you? Like you're being creative, you're getting paid to do it.
That's a great remark, Gordon, because I think I've always been blessed of not really caring about that stuff.
Yeah.
And because I know I heard, I think Trent.
I've never seen Trent search. Yeah, I know. It's
Trent, what's his last name? I've been trying to.
Kuriaga, I think.
Canigua, or sorry, like Trent, if I'm butchering that, but like, you know who we're talking about, and the guy that has the great YouTube channel as well.
He's worked for Riot and Blizzard, and
worked for Riot and Blizzard, and he said, like, I remember this vividly. It was on a recent podcast, and he said, like, a lot of us are always trying to get that prestige, right? And they associate me with that prestige, like they were associating him. But when he was at Blizzard, it was like a handful of people. And he said it was fucking awesome. And the reason it was is because you got a lot of validation and appreciation for what you brought to the project.
Yeah.
The problem when you are at Blizzard now, over at Riot, and that's not to shine a bad light on these artists, it's like you're just one of the fucking many talented people that are there. So even if you make something brilliant, you're still part of the noise almost, which is it's great and sad at the same time. And I think that's where I've always considered myself someone that just, if you pay me to draw, I love you, right? Doesn't matter who you are. I just appreciate you. And that's what I love about my art. And I've had the fortune now to be on bigger projects, work with bigger studios, but I enjoy working with smaller indie studios just as much, especially for the validation, right? If I make something, or Axel makes something, or Carl makes something, it's like highly appreciated. They love it. If it's good enough, right? If it's not, and they say it's shit, that's good too. But but I mean, that's it. You have that appreciation, which I think is definitely something worth noting for a lot of younger artists watching right now. Like, don't strive to be part of the noise, right? And also don't strive to be, because that's a narrative I don't like as well, is like, only do your own thing. Sure, but that's even harder. And what I mean by that is, if you do personal work, I mean, we're like, as an artist, you're the most critical for yourself, right? If you do something for yourself, you're like, most of the time you hate what you make. So imagine making a personal project. You're going to constantly hate what you're doing, unless you're mature enough, like Trent, who's now doing his own thing, to know where he's at and know what to accept from himself. But if you're young, don't focus on, unless you have something in your mind that you just need to get out, there's nothing wrong with working for clients.
Yes.
I would even advise it. It's because if you work for an art director, all you have to do is please the art director. Yeah. That's it. Right? You don't even have to please yourself. If he's happy, you've done a great job and you're validated. And sometimes that really feels good, because I have a lot of shitty days where I'm working on personal things that just don't go my way. And I feel like absolute shit because I'm so critical for myself. But then I'm working on a client project, and at least they love what I'm doing.
Right.
So
and then there's the balance. Yeah.
And then there's the balance. Exactly. So definitely don't discard working for clients, which is like a common narrative you see on a lot of social media. Like, you just do your thing, go out there, don't work for the big bad corporations. I mean, sure, some of them are bad apples, but a lot of them, and I can say this for 100% of everyone that I've worked with, it's been an absolute pleasure.
100%. I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I definitely say that to students as well, that like, it's great if you want to form your own studio or you want to do your own thing, but like that base knowledge of just going into a studio and understanding how pipelines work, how art direction works, how feedback works, feedback loops, especially in ideation, is invaluable. I mean, when I worked for Fabricated, and we were just 5 people, like that, I totally understand it. Like, I would make a 3D model or make something in 3D and hand it to my art director at the time, Matt, and he would be like, "Fuck, that's incredible, Gordon, really well done." And I'd be like, "Oh, thank God."
There you go.
You know what I mean? Like, you feel like, even I'm sitting there like sweating like at every pixel, like, "Oh my God, is it good? Is it good?" And then doing the texture and pass and UV and then I'm throwing it in, and then he's like, "Oh my God, this is," like, even sometimes he's like, "Jesus Christ, Gordon," he's like, "Stop what he's doing." He's like, "This looks fucking incredible," and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's incredible." And you're hearing that like 1-to-1 feedback from the art director, and yeah, like even working with him as an art director over the last year has improved me so much, because submitting pieces into the void like ArtStation is one thing, but handing it to an art director who then will sketch over it and be like, "Here's a couple of passes, here's a couple of things to change," and then you take that 10% at the extra at the end and then put it on ArtStation, you'll get 1,000 more likes, 2,000 more likes, because if your stuff is art directed, it takes a whole new turn from like you just looking at it, like the other set of eyes in it. So I 100% understand what you're talking about small studios.
And that's why I have so much respect for good art directors. And I emphasize the good of this because there are definitely bad art directors. And when I say bad art directors, it's not necessarily art directors that will scold you when you do something wrong. It's not like that. There's just art directors that just do the job, which is that they will validate whether something's good or not. But if you have a good art director, they're not there to teach you. Let me clarify that. An art director is not there to teach you. You should be knowledgeable when you come onto a project. But a good art director will inspire you to do better for the good of the project. And those are the people you want to work for, and they make you better artists as well. You learn so much from them. They never hide anything from you. They include you into the pipeline. I've had some great art directors. I think I can thank a lot of my artistic journey to those art directors. And so it's actually what inspires me to be an art director as well, because a lot of people don't want to be an art director because you're bogged down in meetings, which is true, by the way. Like when I look at myself now running a studio, I meet 50% of my time now and only put pen to paper 50% of the time. So it's definitely a different world, but the influence that you can have on other artists and projects is definitely something that I feel is incredible.
Yeah, I think getting to bring people up and make people better is, I mean, it's the whole reason you launched Art WOD, right? You want people to grow, you want to help people get up, and I think art direction, in a sense, is you've got to be because you can go two kind of routes when you get to that level. You can either go art director or principal, and principal is all about making awesome art and making it constantly, whereas art director is like, now you're in charge of people. Like, now you're making people better. Are you good with people? Are you a good people person? And then, it's basically management. And like you said, it's emails about emails, meetings about meetings. And it definitely, I mean, Raf's the same, like even in Sony Santa Monica, like he hardly does any art now because like it's all just running the studio and running the project. So there's definitely a clear line in the sand you've got to make about which way you want to go. And it's not that once you've been an art director, you can't eventually go back to principal or then turn your hand to doing concept again. It might just be a thing like, right now, this is what I want to do. This is where my focus is. And then maybe in the future, you can go the other route. But art direction, I think, is very rewarding, like teaching is in general, where, rather than just like make it better, which is sometimes some notes you get from people, when you're handing stuff like, your color values off a bit, maybe saturate a bit more or desaturate, make it less saturated, maybe push this to the right. Can you make this whole column move? And, when they're more specific like that, that's definitely something where you're like, oh, I didn't even notice that. Like, that does make it 100% better. Like, so it's a very rare skill, art direction. I definitely, I had the conversation with, on Paul Canavan's stream when he was talking about, he's talking at the moment, and he said it on stream, so this is totally public knowledge, that he's talking to Riot at the moment about an art director role, and he was saying that, I can't maybe draw or paint to a level that somebody like Esben can, or other people who do splash art, but I love people and I love helping people grow, and that's something that I want to focus on. So it is a very centric role where you want to see other people succeed in art direction. That's definitely one of the pillar stones of that job, right?
Yeah, and I compare art direction to when you're an artist and you make a painting, you're making it yourself. But as an art director, you're making a painting with a lot of people. Right. And so what you're doing is everyone has a beautiful piece in the painting, but it's your job to make that painting coherent and consistent for the project. And that's a super fun job to do because you still do art. You still almost If you make the painting analogy, you still worry about the composition of everything, the color scheme, the tone, but you're just doing it by inspiring people to do their best work within this painting. And that's what I love about art direction. And that's why I loved working with good art directors. There's of course also art directors that it's just their 9 to 5, right? And they'll look at what you made and they'll either deem it good or bad, which is which is also fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but it definitely doesn't inspire you to do better.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's the difference between good and great art directors and the people you want to work for versus the people you'll maybe avoid, or the studios that you think are a bit better or make stuff that's better than versus the guys who just churn content out constantly. So, I mean, like, we kind of talked about this and you talked about, like, even with Terraform, how they're doing 80 projects and blah, blah. I mean, like, I think it's just these things that even within the industry, you yourself are still young in the industry.
For sure.
Yeah, so I mean, like, it's a thing where, where Antonio and Sketch Studios be in 5 years. I mean, you might be working with Blizzard, you might be working with Riot, you might be working in these massive companies. You don't know. It's one of these things that you just, for a lot of people, I think the one thing that shouldn't kind of miss is that sometimes you just need to put your nose to the grindstone, and every now and again you get to lift your head and be like, oh, hey, I made this thing, and then go back down to making things. So it's difficult when I think, like, I have probably fell into the trap of chasing accolades. Like, you want to work for Blizzard, you want to work for Riot, you want to work for Sony Santa Monica, whatever, you've got this thing in your mind that, like, your career isn't fulfilled until you get to this point. But I know so many people, using Blizzard as an example, because I know a lot of people there where they've strived to get to Blizzard and then they've got there and then sat in the chair day one at their desk and being like, okay, well, I'm here now. Okay. So, like, I mean, it's no the fireworks and dancing that they thought it was going to be and all the explosions. It was like,
it's
okay,
that famous saying, right? Be careful what you wish for, you might get it.
Exactly. No, 100%. Like, it's even these things where, you have this thing built up in your mind. And especially, I think a lot of people who are initially fans of the industry and then become artists maybe have this, like, thing built up in their head where, like, maybe they've played Assassin's Creed their whole life and they're like, great, I'm getting to work on Assassin's Creed game. I'm sitting down in Ubisoft at my first day, and then you get handed a bunch of spreadsheets and you're logging for your computer and you're like, like, is Ezio Auditore going to walk down the room at one point? Like, what's happening? Like, you want this whole fantasy in your head to come true, but then it's the reality doesn't quite meet it. At the end of the day, as much as we have a passion for the industry and we love learning and 2D and drawing, it's a job. It's a job like any other job. There's good and bad days. You get pay, you take your pay, you go pay it and spend it whatever you're going to spend it in, Monday to Friday and that kind of thing. I think it's not a tale where you're trying to demoralize people. It's just a cautionary tale of, like, try not to romanticize the industry too much, right?
Well, what you should focus on, at least from my perspective, is, and you take everyone that most people look up to, right? Which is a Kim Young-gi, an Ian McKay, a Jamie Jones, the rock stars, the Craig Mullins. They all have something in common. Like Ian McKay, same thing. The only thing they love is the process. They never care about the end result. They never do. I mean, the end result just gets there because of those years of experience. It just, it just materializes. But the thing they all share, me included, which has taken me quite some time to actually get to. For instance, I hate rendering. And you can say, like, it's lazy, you just don't want to finish a painting. I've finished a lot of paintings. I fucking hate it. Right? I cannot do it. I love the process of drawing. It's what gets me excited, what's get me out of bed in the morning. It's the reason why I do the job that I do. And as soon as you love the process that you do, everything else will come. It's the problem that a lot of juniors and a lot of aspiring artists, they focus on the goal. Even when they make art, the thing they're striving towards is the goal of a good character design, the goal of a good landscape. They're focusing on the goal. Instead, focus on the process, because that will dictate both your style and where you will end up. And that's something that almost all people share, all good, great artists share. If you love what you do, and that's what we say, right? If you love what you do, but people think like, work at Blizzard. No, if you love the process that you go through, you will end up where you need to end up.
100%. Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, I've been guilty of it. I've done the whole Road to Blizzard thing and had an idea of like where I wanted to go, but people were like, that's great to have an end goal and fantastic to romanticize that's where you want to be, but make the stuff you want to make in that sense that, where you want your style to go, where you want the process to go, and then naturally you will find yourself at a place where that is a fit. It might not be Blizzard, it might be some small indie studio in Spain, like for who knows where you're going to end up, but like as long as the project and the process is something that you trust, then, you will find your way naturally. And a lot of guys, when you go to these industry talks, industry workshops and stuff like that, they'll say in their talk, like, yeah, like my first gig was this, and I worked in a small studio making like a Candy Crush clone, and it wasn't what I wanted to do, but I was getting paid to do it. So I was like, yeah, it's working, and it's not that you're going to get the job you want first, but you'll get a job. And then for there, then you start to define, well, then I had this other opportunity, and then I went here, and then I didn't think I was going to here, but I went here. And like, you're never going to, I think it's almost impossible to pick a path and say, like, I'm going to this studio or I'm going to work in this thing, unless you're super dedicated and you're like a rare unicorn where like you've got, you're walking to university or college where your portfolio is like AAA style already, and there are those rock stars, those people, but it's rare. It's not the exception, it's the rule, and all this kind of stuff where, yeah, you've just got to basically trust the process, and you'll end up where you're going to end up in the end. So I mean, Axel would have been the same. He probably wouldn't have thought that Sketch Studios was going to be maybe the place he was going to be. I mean, he was obviously maybe at the time training for something else, but then, hey, opportunity comes along, and people talk about luck. I definitely think when somebody told me ages ago where luck for them is opportunity meets preparedness.
Preparation,
yeah,
for sure.
Very
and
true.
Also, like, the thing is, the irony is always, when you love the process, you'll probably get to work on the things that most people have as a goal. And I always compare this to, there's a handful of examples that I always tell students, is if we compare Max Greca, right, the super stylized guy on Instagram, and Jesper Esching, one of my favorite artists, completely different styles, completely different. They both worked on Hearthstone. Their goal wasn't to work for Blizzard. They just love what they do. Blizzard picks up on that, and they use what they love, and that ends up in their product. Like, you cannot set like a certain style. I need to hit this to work for that company. No, what the company's looking for is talent that loves what they do. Same thing with Loish. Super stylized, right? Almost, I cannot find anyone that does more beautiful art than she does. She absolutely loves what she does, right?
Of course.
Like, I cannot go around drawing female faces all day. I would go mad. And this is not a stab at Loish. Like, she loves that, and you see that, and people vibe with that. And you know what? She worked for Guerrilla Games on Horizon. Super realistic game, right? So they just hired her for what she loves to do, which is 100%. What a lot of companies will look out for. Is like, they're looking for talent because what they know, it's almost like a sure bet. Because if you pay someone that loves what they're doing, their process, the end result will always be better. Even if it's not in the style that you're looking for, you can definitely use it.
Yeah. I mean, that also comes back to a recent interview I done in the podcast with my buddy Henrik. And Henrik Rosenberg is somebody who has a style that, if you looked at his stuff, you would think is not the marketable traditional style of concept work or even illustration. But because he was so true to his voice and it was so unique, he's recently started working with Blizzard. And like, that's like you said, like, it wasn't an end goal, wasn't something that he was really aiming for, but then they've definitely looked at his stuff and went, oh, there's a gap, there's an original voice. And it's one of these things that I think is so hard to teach people because, I kind of giggle at this now when I think about it, where I was talking to Rembrandt the other day and I was talking about my journey and what I'm planning to do and so, but I was saying like, oh yeah, laughing, I'm going to be the next Antonio Stappaerts, just watch this. And he was like, dude, be the next Gordon. Like,
exactly.
Be the person that you're going to be. Then you try to be a clone of someone like Jesper and Max and all these guys are great to look up to, but the industry really will reward you for being a unique voice in the industry. People will almost, art directors seek that out constantly. They look for what is unique in the, ArtStation is noise. I'm not like, where's the gems? Where's the people that are really, oh, that looks original, that looks different, like, let's look at this guy's work. And that's the hardest thing I think to be, is to be yourself. It's almost impossible in this industry because there's so much people look up to these big artists like Ian and Max and other people, and they want to be a carbon copy of that person and be who they are, but then they have got successful because they're being themselves.
Exactly. And that's what people don't understand, is that they think that they're copying a style, but what they're actually trying to copy, and if you think about it like that, you know why you fail. What you're trying to copy is the love of a certain process that has been materialized through years of experience. Like, Ian just loves what he does, and that's why he's Ian McKay. Same for Jamie Jones, same for all of those other, Kim Young-gi, same thing. Kim Young-gi sketches all the time. And what he sketches is memories and things he sees in an environment. You can try to copy a style, sure, but you won't be Kim Young-gi. And so that's the thing. Like it's that love of the process that you cannot copy. It's something you need to cultivate for yourself.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. No, I mean, I agreed. Again, I think it's one of these things where it's maybe not seen enough at industry events, and I think the last time I heard somebody really talking about it or hitting it home, it was Sean Silvestri when he done a talk in 2018 at Industry Workshops, and he was like, I think the name of the talk was actually Be Yourself, and it was one of these things where he was like, you know, people look at even him and they're like, oh man, you were working with Blizzard when you were like 23, 24, and he was like, yeah, great, fantastic, but that's not really what I want to do. It's not the thing that was driving me at the time. It was just a gig that came across, and I got the opportunity to work in it. And it's even these things where now when I interviewed, you know, Esmond Rasmussen, you know, like the whole thing people talk about when they interview him is like, right. And he's like, Jesus Christ, you know what I mean? Like, I'm more than just games.
Right.
Like,
yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
It's like the thing where, you know, I actually apply a lot of knowledge to, you know, when I talked about this with Marek Maggi, he talked about, when one of his students talked about getting into concept art was almost as difficult as becoming a mainstream actor in a role. Like it's almost that difficult. There's so much process to it. But he was like, it's the same thing. Like you'll get people who go to studios and work with them long enough and they're almost typecast. Like that's the thing that people always associate with their work is that, you know, I know you because you worked in this massive studio, this massive project, and then the rest of their work is just basically pushed to the bottom because that's all they remember. And Esmond was really guilty of that. He was like, you know, I hate when I come into podcasts and people just constantly want to talk about League of Legends. It's like, that was, you know, 4 or 5 years of my life, fantastic, but it's no the whole, you know, he also worked at Six More Vodka where he'd done incredible work, you know, with those guys over there. So, yeah, it's a very difficult thing to, finding your voice and being individualistic, I think is very difficult in this industry.
Yeah, and it will keep you sane as well. Because, look, there's nothing wrong, by the way, with having goals. Let's put that as a disclaimer. You can, because I'll tell you my goals. I will always, if they ask me to work on a Diablo project, I will drop everything.
Yep.
And I will work on it.
Yep.
Right. And I've been very close. I've been very, very close, but it just got canceled for some reason. But the thing is, like, I believe in the law of attraction. If you want to work on something, but you just do your thing, you love what you do, those things will come to you. And when the opportunity comes, you will be able to do it. So there's definitely nothing wrong with having those goals, but don't make that goal the road that you need to go through. Like, do your own road, make your own path in life, and enjoy that process of walking that path, and then the rest will come onto that path.
100%. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree with you more. 100%. And that's a good note also to, I think, end there, because you've also got a busy day ahead. As always, you know, you're running Art WOD, you're doing your thing, you're running your studio, so I want to let you get back to that. But yeah, thanks for coming on, Antonio. Again, I hope you enjoyed it as you did the last time. I hope you found some fun in the process of discussing art and chatting with me. So
yeah, thanks for having me, Gordon. As always, it's a pleasure. Would love to do it again.
Yeah, of course, definitely. Again, hope to you guys that have listened to this point have enjoyed it. I hope, as always, that the guests I bring on are people that you find interesting. And of course, you know, about Art WOD is at the start of every episode. But like, yeah, of course, I'll leave Antonio's links below, and the other artists he talked about and other things we've talked about in the show notes. We'll have that all down below as well, including the Art WOD website, and you guys can check that out for yourself. I do highly recommend it, of course, as you know. And then, yeah, of course, stay tuned for the next episode. If you can find us right now, we're on YouTube talking away, but we're also on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts and all the other things. And leave a like, a comment, any questions for Antonio, and I'm sure he'll answer them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for you guys listening. Thanks for Antonio joining us again, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.